if I step back and I start with the last part first, like how am I looking at AI as a human, as like just an artist existing, and also as a father who have kids coming up into this world that is kind of shifting under their feet a little bit, right? Like the internet for us, for me at least, growing up, that was a big shift, and that's been compared to like like the internet for us, the AI is kind of that next revolution of like this new thing that changes a lot of aspects. But in some ways, I think for me, I think that any tool that assists can be used poorly or well, right? Like a carpenter who has a nail gun, AI is more than a nail gun, right? But a carpenter has a nail gun and they're going to, if they're a good carpenter, they use it and they build faster and they can work potentially more if they want, or they can get something done to the same level faster. Different than like a carpenter thinking about something and talking to a machine and having it do all the nailing. But the carpenter still has to know what the end result is going to be and to get something that's productive. And I think the way that I'm looking at it and the way I want to use it, and the way I do use it is an assistance to save myself time to prototype and to create ideas and to explore for myself something that normally would have taken days of me searching and asking friends and doing this connective work and interrupting time and taking up resources that instead of actually refining the idea and kind of having a better starting point, AI gives me that sooner. So I can have an idea and go, you know what? Well, I did it yesterday. I I had an idea. I've had this idea for a while, and I finally decided to like just kind of outline the idea and into an AI chat and trying to get a better framework to think about it for myself. And so when I talk about it to my kids or I think about how I use it, there are all kinds of ways that, you know, it's not taking something away, it's additive, right? But you have to use it with intention. And so when I talk to my kids about it or I talk to my, think about it myself, I have to be careful to go, well, is this repetitive work that's being replaced, or is it something that I just can't physically do or mentally do? Then my choice is search for it, but I don't know how to search for it yet because I don't have the words. Or I can ask friends if I'm lucky enough to have friends that could point me in the right direction. And then third, if I get both of those things, if I find a friend who points me in the right direction, then I search for it and then I still hit a dead end because I don't understand what I found, then that's the end of that thought. With AI, I can search or have a conversation with the AI chat, or I can use an AI tool to get me to a point that then I can ask my friends who do know better questions. Or I can be specific in my thought about an idea, a design, try something out before I invest a lot of time and then get stuck. So I try to make it an additive process and an assistance to get myself into a more defined end goal as opposed to letting it replace something that I want to do. Or it's not just taking away things, it's an additive thing for me. Um, so that's how I'm thinking about it as a person, I look for places where it can make mundane things better, and also for people that are stuck and limited, it's going to be an additive point for their life, right? If I'm a student, I'm not going to make it, and this is for my kids, you're not going to let it write the paper for you. But if you're having trouble understanding a concept so that you can think about it and write it yourself, then that's going to be another resource to ask versus searching and hoping someone talked about it and then not really knowing if you found the best resource. So
So you as
that's
a
how
rigger, you as a rigging expert,
yeah.
I take it that the way you think about AI isn't the same as concept artists who are very uneasy about the text to image applications, right? So what
Yeah.
type of AI are you thinking about?
So for rigging, um, and I've had conversations with concept artists too. And again, it's well, I'll share a story with my friend because I asked him if he was worried about AI, and he's been a professional concept artist for a very long time. And he said it finally freed him to care about his own work again. He was no longer the tool being used by someone else to be creative. He got to be creative for himself and let AI assist in the work part. So I thought that was an interesting shift that it instead of taking away or being worried about it, it allowed him to have creative energy for himself as an artist and gave him his energy back to create for himself versus feeling like an actual being, being used as a person and people just demanding art and creation and changes constantly. And that's exhausting as an artist, right? If someone doesn't know art until it's finished, then you're burning a lot of energy on ideas that basically are thrown away. And not always that process of creating is going to, be negative, but when you're trying to make money and when it's a business versus you're being an artist, it's a very different thing. And I think that's for rigging. I look at it and we've had automation and in the article, right, I point to places where there's automation for skin weights, or you can, a lot of people will, if you're going to use Mixamo to rig something, they've had, kind of intelligent skinning and rigging of characters. You upload a mesh. There are places where you can find AI or just automation that skips and lets you remove a character TD artist from the equation. But those people weren't going to ever hire a character TD in the first place, so it's false work. Like I'm not gonna. They'll either buy a rig and download it that's finished, or they're gonna just kind of scrape together whatever they got. And if they were rigging it themselves, then they'll find the fastest way to get it done, and then they can be creative, or they can try to do their work. And not everyone needs to pay for another person to spend time building it out and doing all this work for them if their project doesn't fit the requirements either, right? Because in the end it's money and someone's paying for something and someone's trying to get something done. And for specifically rigging, there are so many steps and so many things that are still, even with automated scripts, are so manual that you don't have time to spend on the creative part of rigging, shaping how stuff moves, getting better results, having more flexible rigs that are, it's just you get to a point where you can say stop, and then that's where it gets stagnant because everything is stuck on that point. The flexibility, the iteration, all of that basically goes, nope, we're out of time. Now you just have to go and make something, and then the next push for money, the next need for something to be done, you have this little window of time. And if you want to change something, all of that has to be done by hand and updated, and you're tracking everything. So for rigging, especially, both AI assisting making scripts for people that maybe don't have a comp sci degree, which people, you can be a good script hacker and have an AI assist versus bothering your overworked programmer. So that's for creating code to use for rigging, it's great. Again, if you use it to have a specific goal to improve your own understanding, on and on. For actual automation of, like, I have a mesh from a concept artist or a model that someone sketched out with all the power of ZBrush, all the amazing tools to manipulate data. then they hand it to rigging and we're back to like box modeling, polygon, point by point manipulation and hand matching joints, and just endless amounts of work that is very fragile. It's very slow. It's, oh, this side is named right with a different name than normal, so now my script doesn't work. There's an axis change. Like most of the work that kind of ends up being character tech art is just managing changes and tracking that stuff by hand instead of actually spending time on making the animation tool better or making the rig look nicer. It's just managing. Someone changed something and now I have to track down and update stuff. So an AI adaptive tool that can be in the software to help you manage change would be awesome. I can iterate over waiting, right? I can say, well, I have all these deformers and I want a new way to I want a different smooth algorithm, but I only have the smooth brush in Maya. Or I can go download Brave Rabbit's tool. But if I want to change any of those things or I want to adjust it, the loop to go do that is so long that I won't get to it and no one's going to pay for it unless you have a big production. And even then, those things are, legacy assets. So rigging AI, automation of all the change management and handling that stuff beyond just file referencing. Oh, did you reference the file? Nope. Is this animation? Did we switch the axis order on the rig? Well, now you got to hand retarget 4,000 animation. I mean, all of that stuff could be completely managed by AI, either looking at things when it's saved or updating rigs or tracking changes and prompting, hey, this mesh moved 4 inches. Like there's a bunch of places where automation and assistance could happen behind the scenes, not just actually rigging the character. Pipeline and all that stuff would be great. Skeleton design, building all the stuff, even with the rig, you're still doing a lot of steps that are error prone and by hand instead of spending time on the art. So I think for me, it's a flexibility and it makes it workable instead of just watching spreadsheets and trying to do calculations by hand on a calculator and transfer that information around instead of having like a spreadsheet you can manage the data.
What would you focus on if you wanted to stay in touch with all these changes that happen so quickly? Like
Yeah,
just the thought of, okay, what am I going to be doing
that's a
now?
good question.
So I don't miss
Yeah.
out.
Well, I think the thing that, and I've said this before in discussions about AI, is that if we take a look at like the changes in the industry from animation to two-dimensional drawing to keyframe, like 3D, and then motion capture, or photography, where if you to be a photographer, you needed to not only understand all the principles of light, you had to know how the film was going to develop, you had to control the film developing. All of that is still the artist's choice. It's just that if you didn't have access to that material to learn, then it's immediately out. It's not an option. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. I didn't have access to film equipment. I didn't have access to a if you look way back when kids were getting like a lot of my friends that were being creative as kids, or you look at, a generation back, people that had access to equipment got to be creative. They got to make films because they had a 8 millimeter camera, or film rolls, or a camera in the family that you could zoom and practice with. Right now everyone has an iPhone or a phone that has a lot of control, and how many people use it? Not very many. There's 1,000 bad photos, so having more tools didn't suddenly take away jobs from photographers. Those jobs weren't going to be given to them in the first place. It's just they were going to have bad photos or no photos, and now we have more. And so then managing all that data is important, but if you actually want to use an iPhone or even just a regular camera, you still have to understand composition. You still have to understand light. You still have to understand the equipment and how the lens affects it and the speed of things. And like, there's still standards that no matter what you do with when you take a picture on an iPhone and it does exposure and does all the stuff, those are all still principles that are being kind of automated in the phone, but the artist still matters. What I took a picture of, how I frame it, the how the lighting is, all the decisions that are personal to the expression of my idea and opinion is the artistic part. The rest is just a tool choice. If I use a crayon and or a pencil, or hand create pixels in Excel and make a giant spreadsheet dot matrix art of someone's face, like the tool is just an outcome of the artistic choices and vision and the the learning of the person. And so you still have, for rigging or anything in AI, you still should want to have a point of view, and you should still want to be specific with the work. So let's narrow that back down to rigging. If I have a character that right now, production timeline for like a kid's cartoon or like a web series, or someone trying to make something, right? The commercial production, anything that's a short timeline, but they want a lot of content, you know that the quality level is going to look a certain way. It's just going to, there are constraints in money, there's constraints in animation quality, there are constraints in how many people can do the work at the level that would make it look better. There's limited budget and design work ahead. They have a toy that, whatever the process is. If you watch like general like young kids programming material, not always the best, due to not the talent of people, but all of the other restrictions. They have so much content to make that they only have this much time to make a rig, and it's close enough, and or you have to go to a game engine. All the constraints that are currently there limit the quality that you get to do, because you're spending all this time just getting set up. With animation and mocap, motion capture gave you the ability to create these very realistic motions and capture them and build a large library of motion faster than having a bunch of people sitting around keyframing. But the artist still needs to be there to do something with it. And the difference is that it shifts your planning, how you plan and when you plan for motion capture. Instead of it being spread out as each animator does something, you move it to the front. You plan your shoot, you plan it just like you would to get any other acquisition of assets. You know where you're going to go shoot. You have to set up the actors, you get all the stuff ready. Once you have the motion captured, you have a baseline that is even. So instead of one animator is good here, one animator is amazing here, and there's a bunch of people in between that are trying to make something that feels cohesive, the motion capture automatically gives you a baseline that is higher than a bunch of random people doing stuff. And then everyone can plus that. But you have a starting point that is already better than maybe your best animator you could hire or find. If you look at AI for rigging, for deformations, or for skeletal control, if the best character TD that you can afford and that is available, which is already a narrow box, has enough time to just get basic skinning on a character with a rig, but you have 400 characters that you would like to have for your creative vision, and they can only deliver 5, then the bottleneck isn't he's not good enough, or that the vision, the available time and money don't match the vision of the person trying to make something. And so the AI tools should, including in rigging and concept art and modeling, right? ZBrush gives you this sculptor ability to not care about topology. You don't have to box model anymore. Rigging, we're still box modeling, basically. So if an AI tool gives me the ability to generate a skeleton that is pretty close, auto weight it, and then spread out helper joints automatically that get close, or apply some other deformation system to it, and then also run it through a range of motion that can train a deformation solver that looks good when you take it to a game with look muscles and all that stuff, and it still runs fast, then all of that stuff is done, and I can work on making sure that the character controls are the way the animator wants, or I can spend time getting that process applied to all the characters and making sure that they look the best they can in this limited budget of time and money. And I can actually help the person create their vision versus, well, I can rig 3 characters in the timeline they have, but they need 50. And so then we try to outsource it to a group of people, and they're, then you work overtime, and like it cascades really quickly into who's got the cheapest, fastest way to get this stuff done. The amount of time that some artist is up late working overtime on just transforming data around instead of making something new or making something better, it's disproportionate. I've worked on projects where, like updating legacy assets, you could have AI help you update a library of legacy assets to new systems and do quality checking and help get that to the starting point so you could make something new. Or you can try to do it by hand, run out of time, and then you just go back to the legacy assets because the new stuff didn't get it done in time, or there were too many what if this didn't work questions. And so now, instead of something new and getting ready to move to it, every hardware for games, PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 5 is a very different look, right? You have a whole new tooling every time you have a game finish 3 years into a cycle. That's a lot of technology shift, but now you have 3-year-old assets that if you want to keep alive because you're delivering more content on them, like that thing can't change now. So to me, the exciting part is that we could finally kind of be freed up from being stuck on past decisions as being, well, I can't touch it because it's too complicated to update. Or I could update this one thing, but I only have time to do that. So that's not going to work, right? It's not that they can't do it. It's just that the scale of it usually is too cost prohibitive, or there just simply aren't enough people that are skilled at the level they need to be to lift everything back up to a new starting point to go build on. When you have a mesh, the mesh is there. You can import it into a new version. You can subdivide it. Topology tools keep getting better, but if you have a old model, like, it's a mesh, it's a mesh. You can still export to OBJ and send it around, but a rig and deformation that stuff is all intertwined. The animation curves, the hierarchy of the controls, the number of bones, the number of influences, the target asset, the software that it was rigged in, all of these things are kind of self-limiting, where you have all of these other tools in CG that aren't. Material X, you know, like the big shift for rigging is still not here, but AI might be able to do it, and I think it will, the same way that having ZBrush for modeling or Mudbox or just sculpting tools in general free up people to sculpt and become creative with the tool. The same way that being able to use HDRI images change lighting, right? Instead of making 1,000 spotlights and or global illumination, right? Instead of trying to set up the scene full of lights that are limited to this and trying to fake all of the caustics and the bouncing and all those stuff that used to be done by hand, you open your file and you import an image and your lighting is done. Like that's the material looks real. It knows how to read the light. It bounces automatically. That's one import file image versus, well, I was really skilled at writing a shader that would look and emulate the look of something. And, for visual effects or for trying to match something, we went from the like, well, that character doesn't quite fit in the scene to you can't tell that that's not there unless it moves weird, right? Like you're like that. I believe that thing is in that spot because the lighting is right. The computer is doing the work, quote unquote. So, I think people that are in CG, like if you're afraid of AI doing the work, then you should be afraid of HDRI images taking your lighting jobs. You should be afraid of, you know, sculptors and ZBrush remeshing, right? People still want to do topology themselves, but those tools keep getting better and they're good enough in a lot of cases, better than anybody that's, you have one good modeler that can do topology and five that can't. You're going to use the auto retopo tools and get on with your day. UV unmapping, all that stuff. Like anything that is like it feels like you're trying to protect your craft, immediately you're limiting yourself. And the same way with knowledge and rigging too, like I've just never, I think that's a little bit of the AI discussion feels protectionist in that someone's trying to hold on to something that was something that took them a while to figure out versus actually letting that go and letting themselves expand and be better at some new area.
Text to image AI, that there's this quite
Mm-hmm.
understandable controversy that it was based on theft
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stealing the art just to train the model.
Yeah.
Is this also necessary with all these technical areas that you are describing?
I think that that's already happened, right? Like if you look at, if I know that if I ask any of the AI chats about code, there's a chance that they're reading and interpreting and that they've been trained or that they're creating information based on something that was public but not meant to be reused or private and have found it anyway or how I can't as an end user I like all of that stuff's already happened. So for art text to image we know that there's no copyright for AI created images right now, so like that automatically limits the final use of something. But the ethics aside, for technical stuff, you know, no matter how you create an image or create something, if you're just using clip art, hmm, let me rewind that a minute. If you are worried about ethics about how something was trained, which is valid, we don't want stuff just being stolen, but that's already happened. So we can't go back in time. That the legal fight is a whole group of people that are going to fight that battle. Artists can choose not to use it. They can choose to use it in the way that they feel is most ethical. Or they can choose to make art however they want, but the chance of them having a career lowers. Just because the same way that if you're trying to get someone to make an illustration and you only have this much money and this much time, then you're going to find someone that fits that. And you were going to go to Fiverr or you're going to go somewhere else, and you don't know where they were getting images either, right? You still have to have a level of trust with an artist that they're going to do something correctly, and there are cases where they don't. And the music industry, I think, has a pretty good model of like, well, you used a sample or you used a sound or it sounds similar, and then they have a very well-defined existing framework for managing reuse and something that sounds similar, even though they use the same instruments, they use the same, it's a voice. There are certain instruments, you're recording the information, like there are rhythms that kind of repeat. So how do you have all this different stuff and not fight with each other? And so, all that to say, unless you take an AI system and train it on only your internal things, which is possible, then you still have to create enough information yourself or as a company to train it to the level it becomes useful. If you're a Disney, that's going to be much faster than like you and I sitting there and going, well, I made a few files at whatever quality I could, and then I'll train it on that. I think that the cleanest example of just narrowing this down, the Unreal machine learning solver for deformation means that you can take and spend time making your character simulate the clothes, do all the deformation you want, and then the ML solver will be trained on what you give it to output deformation that looks like all those complicated layers, but gives you something that moves on a lighter mesh, right? So there are examples where you can train this stuff locally, but you'd have to have enough information that is yours alone to train it to ever make it useful, I think, at the moment. That could change, but it's as what the quality that goes into any of these training models is the same as the output you're going to get out of it, and then the person using it still has to know what they're doing. And so I think it's the way I use it, and like I have a tool that I made yesterday. Right? I have had this idea for a while, and I do a lot of animation retargeting. I do a lot of like taking two things and connecting them together. Rigging is constraining relationships and matching these things and connecting stuff. And most of those tools basically go, well, I have a list of names and I have another list of names, and you have to by hand match them or set up filtering to try to guess the name and do all of this stuff. It's all very fragile. It's very like you can make enough if then statements. If it says right, or if it says R underscore or RT underscore, or you can make a whole set of constraints to filter things, but you're still just filtering lists by hand in scripts that is a huge waste of time. So I said to a little AI chat, I was like, well, here I defined and pseudocoded what I wanted to program, but have not had time to do, just to see if I could get it close, or if it could clean that language up so that I could think about the problem better. And for once or twice, I've had it actually produce a working script that does something. So yesterday, I was trying out the idea. I had 20 minutes at a coffee shop. I was like, well, I'm going to just see how this works. And it now looks at whatever's closest, and then it says, oh, I don't need a name, or I don't need to look at the hierarchy. I just say these two things are selected, filter, scan the hierarchy and find what's closest, and then connect those. Doesn't matter their name. It doesn't matter where they are in the hierarchy. It just looks and goes, hey, are you within a distance? Yes. Are you on this side of the mesh? Is it close? Yeah, good enough. I'll try that and connect it. And then I don't need to create lists of names and mappings and save all the stuff. So just like we would skin a mesh, just skin these objects together, connect them. And it worked, and it was really nice. And I was like, yeah, I've hacked these kind of things together before to ignore names and just go down matching hierarchies and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, just check the position within a threshold. Let me set those values and then go, yeah, close enough, do it. It's what I would be doing anyway. But we don't have those tools. But I have a little function that I could share with someone who is a programmer and go, hey, your tool that does this, why don't we try it this way? Here's a working example, and I can move on with my day. And I didn't have that in existence, and wouldn't have if I didn't have an AI assistant do some helping when I had time. The thought was stuck. I had programmers that, yeah, that's a great idea, but they don't have time. And so, it was beyond what I had energy or time for to actually make myself. But now it exists because I had an assistant that had time. But I had to know how to ask it the question. I had to know how to think through the problem. I had to direct it, and all of that comes from the experience I have. So it's not free. It wasn't just make the script and it magically worked. And 5 years from now, it will probably be able to do more of that. But I still have to have the intention of what I want to do. And just having more choice doesn't make someone more creative. But how you think about it, and to come back to your question as we wrap up, what's important for any person is having their own voice and knowing what they want to say and knowing what to look for. So if I'm going to rig something, and we know that entry level jobs are usually skinning work because skinning is the easiest to get someone trained up on, but really, really good deformation takes time, and doing high level complicated deformation and muscle solves and all that, you still have to go back and know what to look for. You have to think about, how does the muscle attach? You have to understand how these things move together. So the same way an animator should look at the what was inspiring the original animation guys, right? Like the Disney Nine Old Men, they weren't looking at old animation, they were looking at nature. They would bring a deer in, they were, all art goes back to the source. Basic, going back to seeing with your eyes something that's there, not just what you imagined. And so continuing to always return to the artistic foundation of, what do I have to say? How am I going to say it? Or what am I looking for? And can I see what's really there and not just what the icon is? Oh, it's a dog. It moves like a dog. Well, what kind of dog? That changes what you're doing. If I say draw a tree and someone makes the stick and the green leaves and the sun, crayon style, fourth grade level of, like, I know what a tree is. That's iconography iconography of what a tree is. They didn't ask the question, well, do you want pine? Do you want spruce? Do you want, is it, what season is it? Is it a tree that's evergreen and it's winter? Like, the questions and what you ask and what you want to convey are important in your work. And the AI doesn't replace that. Someone that doesn't have something to say with AI will still not have something to say. It won't connect. It won't go anywhere. So they can make 1,000 images of stuff, and it may technically look good, and someone may fall for that mistake or fall for it. It's like, oh, that looks cool, but there's still, people have to have something to say if they're going to be creative and be artistic as a career, and that will show up in their work, and that will continue to filter out stuff that's not just clip art, right? Clip art AI looks amazing, but it has nothing to say. People that are good at creating ideas and communicating, they will always be able to use a tool, whatever it is, to get that information out to connect to other people. So however you want to frame that, going back and looking at how you can see real things with fresh eyes, no matter what the tool is, will be the thing I continue to focus on.